He's president of the American Commitment, a leading free market policy analyst and advocate in Washington. He joins us from Newsmax Washington. Phil, your take on what went down with the FCC yesterday?
Well, I think that soundbite you played was really Orwellian, because this was a chairman of the FCC on the day that he decided to change the internet from an unregulated, competitive free market to a government-controlled utility, claiming nobody wants to control the internet. Well, if you have 317 pages of rules, it was 332 when Obama wrote it in the White House. They took 15 out that Google didn't like, and so they apparently got to see the plan and take out the 15 pages they didn't like, but that's an aside. You have a 317-page plan to regulate the internet. People haven't seen the details of, but we know it's going to regulate every economic aspect of the network, every rate that's charged between companies and consumers. They're now all going to be subject to a just and reasonable standard, which means complaints can be filed at the FCC, which can then set rates, and lawyers can litigate. So there are going to be tons of lawsuits all over the place where people say, oh, I don't like this price, I think it's too high, I don't like the way they're managing this network, I don't like that they're allowing this service and not this service. It is going to change what's been the greatest engine of economic growth and creativity as a free market type system into a heavily regulated, micromanaged system by bureaucrats in Washington and trial lawyers, and we don't even know all the details because they won't tell us. And this guy's saying, oh ho ho, this means nobody wants to control the internet. And I'll tell you, JD, most Americans, including me by the way, don't think that economic regulation will end there. We think that it'll lead to content control as well. 68% of Americans, according to a Rasmussen survey, believe that regulating the internet risks content control. And here's how I think that's going to happen. They're going to destroy private investment with all of these rules and regulations. We're going to be forced to make up for that private investment with our tax dollars in universal service fund fees, state and local and federal taxes and so forth. And when we're paying 20, 30, 40% of the cost of the network as taxes, suddenly people will say, well, this is a public network. It needs to be run in the public interest with public interest regulation, equal time requirements. We need to make sure that the voices of all are heard and so forth. And so we're starting down an extremely dangerous path if this order is allowed to stand. I think the order is probably illegal, so we'll see what happens in court. But
right, that's what I want to ask you.
On them.
We only have about 20 seconds left, so real quickly, what can Congress do?
Well, Congress can pass a law and overturn this. They could do that tomorrow, and they need to get serious about it. Not one Democrat's even willing to come to the negotiating table right now. They're not willing to stand up to this White House, and that's really quite outrageous because the unregulated internet has been a bipartisan success story for 2 decades, and now the Democrats are all just doing whatever Obama wants.
Yeah, the suspicion is the internet becomes Obama-net. We want to talk more about this with Phil Kerpen. And are there some legitimate consumer complaints? Because that seems to be the leverage that prompted all this talk of so-called net neutrality to begin with. More with Phil Kerpen on so-called net neutrality as America's Forum continues. Potential growth on the internet. Let's continue our conversation now with the president of American Commitment, Phil Kerpen. Phil, I guess it was Milton Friedman who said, if you want less of something, tax it. And I guess the corollary is, if you want less creativity, regulate it. That's what we're about to see.
Yeah, and actually these regulations are going to bring new taxes, and for most people that'll probably be the first thing they notice that's different about the internet once these rules take effect, which won't be for a while because they've got to go through a certain bureaucratic process and be published in the Federal Register and so on. But there are a lot of state and local taxes and fees that apply to your phone bill now that don't apply to your internet bill, and now that they're reclassifying the internet as just another big phone system, those local taxes and fees will apply. There's one study that shows that'll increase prices 12.4% with just those state and local fees. And of course, there's also the question of federal universal service fund taxes, which the FCC yesterday said they would defer a decision on, probably because they didn't want to be attacked in the same day for regulating the internet and taxing it. But believe me, when they end that deferral and make a decision, they're going to put federal taxes on as well. And so this is going to be a big tax hit as well as being a regulatory hit.
And let's draw the distinction here and really spot the scam at work by the FCC. Oh, they won't call it taxes at the federal level. They'll say there's, in essence, a user fee. But a fee and a tax, basically the same thing. Of course, Congress alone has the constitutional power to levy taxes, but that's the scam they're going to pull. Let me ask you this, Phil. We got about 2.5 minutes remaining. A lot of people are saying, you know, my download speeds, I'm worried that there's some sort of scam. I'm not able to get Netflix the way I want it. consumer complaints have been the door or the opportunity through which this initiative moved. Are there some legitimate consumer complaints out there?
Well, look, I think that most places in the United States, you've got two choices of broadband internet between your phone and your cable company. A lot of places have other choices as well, with overbuilders and other third-party providers, wireless internet service providers, and so forth. Would it be great if there were more choices? Yeah, I'd love it if Google Fiber built out in every city. I'd love it if everyone had 3 or 4 or 5 choices. But these networks cost billions and billions of dollars to build, and we should not take for granted that having 2 is better than most of the world. Most places in the world just have 1 choice. They just have that local telephone monopoly, and that's it. Most places in the world don't have anything like the U.S. cable industry, and so there aren't a ton of choices. You might not have, you might not love your service provider, but it really could be a lot worse, but just given how expensive it is to build these networks. And I think from a government policy standpoint, we ought to be doing exactly the opposite of what the FCC did yesterday. We ought to make it easier for new competitors to build out so that people do have more choices and there's more competition. We shouldn't put more regulations on. We should be taking them off, and in particular at the local level, we should make it much easier to get pole attachments. We should make it much easier to get access to underground conduit, and we should get rid of all of these antiquated franchising requirements where people have to build out in areas of town where it might not be profitable. We should make it as easy as possible for more companies to enter the market, but unfortunately new regulations have the opposite impact, and they're not going to make your service better. I promise you, federal regulators are not going to make whatever problems you have with your cable phone company better. They're going to make them worse.
20 seconds left. Did Tom Wheeler really pick up this idea courtesy of President Obama and his unprecedented public comments on this issue?
Oh, there's no question in the world. The Wall Street Journal had a stunning sort of insider TikTok on exactly how this happened. It's actually kind of amazing, sort of a dullard CEO, this guy David Karp, who was a sort of a bumbling fool on CNBC the other day, is the one who convinced Obama to do it. Obama had these rules written by political staff in the White House and delivered over to the FCC. They denied it and denied it and denied it, and then after the vote yesterday, the Democratic National Committee website put up a big thing that says the FCC has adopted President Obama's plan. So I don't even think they're trying to...
They're not trying to hide it. And truth in labeling now, they're bragging, in essence, the internet has become the Obama net. We'll keep an eye on this. Phil Kerpen, we thank you. And America's Forum continues right after this.